This is not my dog. In fact, I stole her from a friend while that friend is in hospital. Let me explain. I've kidnapped her to surprise my friend with a custom-made sculpture. But I only have 24 hours to make the sculpture and get her back before Cat comes home. So, we better get sculpting. For the armature, I'm repurposing a paper towel holder made from wood. I'm going to shorten it a bit and then bulk out my shapes in tinfoil with this added screw avoiding it from sliding off. Then I'm conditioning some random old pieces of polymer clay. There are like 2 or 3 types mixed together here, which works great for my base layer as you'll never notice it in the final sculpture. While that goes off to the oven for a pre-bake, I'll take some basic measurements of Bitten whilst bribing her with treats, of course. Now we're ready to start the actual work, for which I'm using Sculpey Medium. This is firmer than standard Super Sculpey and needs a bit more conditioning, but it's so nice to work with and you can achieve a quite high level of detail. I'm going to slobber my pre-baked base layer in Bacon Bond to be doubly sure it doesn't separate. After covering it in about 5mm of Sculpey Medium, I then find my eye line and place the eyes at their designated distance before blocking out the surrounding shapes. During this process, I'm also learning an awful lot about Chihuahua anatomy and can hereby conclude that Bitten belongs under the subcategory of appleheads. Then it's onto the facial features, and for a while this kind of makes her look like the dog counterpart to Grumpy Cat. With my rake tool, I'm evening out the clay, and I'm also using it to add the fur direction, though it will be a while yet before I'm ready to sculpt the actual fur. It's really important that I get the eyes right, as this will always be a focal point, and they are of course also one of the hard to miss characteristics of a Chihuahua.
Wanna go for walkies? Oh, I'm with someone who does. Come on, little one. Good boy. And good girl.
Then it's back to the sculpting board and time to refine the details. I can't quite shake this feeling that there's something misaligned, and I think it has something to do with the eyes. Even though they're quite protruding, I think they actually are still set too deep. Bitten, we need to compare. What do you reckon? Oh, don't like it? There's this saying that if you want something done fast, do it right the first time. And though I hate cutting into the sculpture at this point, I'd much rather do it now than after we start adding fur and texture, because it's going to be so much worse backtracking at that point. Okay, now we can continue. As I'm refining the shapes, I visualize lines and planes on my object, and I mark those onto my clay to help guide my high points and my low points. Sculpting is such a constant process of adding and removing clay, but these subtle shapes will really help to establish the likeness. Okay, so now I have a problem with the ears. Because they are so thin and oversized, I'm instead going to sculpt them from CosClay, which will stay flexible after baking. CosClay Firm has a similar consistency to Sculpey Medium, and it's no problem getting the two to bond. The colour difference won't matter either, as it will all be covered by paint. CosClay can get a little sticky, so I like to powder it off with cornstarch. Then it's time for Bitten's nose job. She also has this characteristic underbite, which is one tooth sticking out when she smiles. I'm sculpting a single tooth and heating it with my blowtorch. This won't fully cure it, but it will give it a firm shell that means I can handle it without damaging it while I continue working. It's finally time to sculpt the fur, and I start by marking out some lines to establish the hair direction. I then add a bunch of tiny clay sausages to give the fur a three-dimensional look. If I just carve the fur into my existing clay, then the final surface will look quite flat. This is my dedicated fur tool, which is homemade from steel wires that's been flattened at the ends. I run it over my clay sausages, always moving in the fur direction. This blends in the new clay whilst adding a bunch of tiny lines, and I carve in some more defined lines with a tiny loop tool. Then I smooth it all over with isopropyl alcohol. I'm using a texture stamp taken off an orange to add some texture to the nose, but then decide it's way too subtle, and instead I enhance it dot by dot. And last, I knock it back with ISO before dusting it over once again with a bit of cornstarch. Then it's time to bake the final sculpture, which happens at 120 degrees Celsius, and with the clay cured, it's time to catch a snoozy before moving on to painting in the morning.
It's day 2 and I have 4 hours left of my self-imposed deadline, but there's been a change of plans. Kat is no longer being discharged from hospital today, so instead I'm going to attempt to smuggle Bitten into hospital to surprise her and cheer her up. But first, we've got a sculpture to paint.
I'm going to paint the sculpture with a faux bronze finish, which involves spray paint, gold wax, and a bunch of acrylic washes. If you want to learn my bronze magic trick, I've actually done a specific tutorial on that, which I'll link to in the description. With just 1 hour left on the clock, it's time to head to Kat's.
So we're here, we're finally at the hospital, and I got Bitten tucked into my jacket.
And after some hugging and some crying and Bitten trying to eat the paper bag, that's a wrap for this project. I hope you enjoyed following along. and hope to see you for the next video. Bye!